Tyler, Greg, and Ryan are the same age, earn the same salary, and start with the same money. They all want the same thing: to turn the stock market into real wealth. Tyler decides he's going to actually beat the market. He learns to read charts, watches the open every morning, and trades in and out of positions every single day, hunting the moves everyone else is too late to catch. Greg takes the calmer version. He holds his trades for a few days or a few weeks, swinging with the trend. And Ryan does almost nothing at all. He buys one index fund every month and closes the app. For the first couple of years, Tyler looks like the obvious genius. He's up on weeks the others are flat, he's got screenshots, he's got stories, and he's convinced the other two are leaving money on the table. He thinks he's winning, and on the scoreboard he checks every night, he is. But the scoreboard he's checking isn't the one that decides who retires rich. And when you run the real math across 30 years, the gap between these three isn't close. And the winner is almost certainly not who you'd bet on. Let's keep this completely fair. Tyler, Greg, and Ryan are all 30 years old. They each earn $75,000 a year. Same city, same tax bracket, same goal: build real wealth in a regular brokerage account and retire comfortably at 60. They each put $1,000 a month into the market every month for 30 years. Same money in. The only thing that's different is what they do with it. Tyler decides he's going to beat the market. He learns to read charts, he studies candlestick patterns, he's at his screen before the opening bell. He buys and sells the same day, hunting for the moves, in and out, over and over, hundreds of trades a year. To Tyler, sitting still feels like leaving money on the table. Greg takes the calmer version of the same idea. He's a swing trader. He holds a position for a few days, sometimes a few weeks, riding a trend until it runs out, then moves to the next one. He's not glued to the screen all day like Tyler, but he's checking charts most evenings and trading several times a month. Ryan does something that barely looks like a strategy at all. He buys one low-cost S&P 500 index fund, the entire US stock market in a single purchase every month for $1,000. He doesn't pick stocks. He doesn't read charts. He doesn't time anything. He buys, and he closes the app. At the barbecue, Tyler has the stories. Greg has opinions about where the market's heading. Ryan has nothing to say because "I bought the index again" isn't a conversation. But feelings and math are two very different things. And over the next 30 years, the quiet one is about to expose everything the other two believed. For the first couple of years, Tyler looks like the obvious genius. He hits a hot streak. There are weeks he's up 4% while Greg and Ryan are flat. He screenshots his best days and sends them to the group chat. He talks about being green on the month, about having an edge, about how he's actually doing something while his friends just sit there. The wins feel like proof. Every good trade confirms the story he's telling himself. Greg's doing fine, quietly. A few trades work, a few don't, and he's roughly keeping pace. Ryan? There's nothing happening on Ryan's screen at all. Just a number that ticks up a little, drifts down a little, and steadily grinds higher. No drama, no screenshots, no story. On the only scoreboard Tyler ever looks at, this week versus last week, he's winning. But here's what Tyler can't see yet. Every winning trade he closes is a taxable event the same year he closes it. Every round trip costs him a little in spreads and fees. And the trades he loses don't make the group chat. Wall Street has understood the math on active trading for decades. Tyler's trading app has never once mentioned it. The mirage is forming. He just doesn't see it. And then Tyler has the year that convinces him he's right about everything. A couple of years in, the market runs hot, his trades line up, and he posts a monster 12 months. He beats Greg, he beats Ryan, he beats the market itself. For one glorious stretch, he is unambiguously the smartest guy in the group chat. He starts doing the math on going full-time. He looks at what it would take to quit his job and trade for a living. This, he decides, is the proof. The strategy works. Then the year turns. The trades that worked stop working. A couple of big ones go hard against him. And the spring after his monster year, the IRS sends the bill. Taxed as ordinary income, every single dollar of that gain at his full paycheck rate. By the time the dust settles, most of what he made has handed itself back, half in losses and half in tax. The great year wasn't the beginning of something. It was the high point. Tyler just doesn't know that yet. He's already planning the next one. And that one belief that the good year is repeatable is what keeps him in the chair for the next 28 years. Day trading is one of the most heavily marketed activities in all of retail finance, and there's a reason. The action feels incredible, but there's a difference between feeling like a winner and building wealth. Day trading is very good at the first one. It almost never delivers the second. Let's start with the cost almost no trading influencer explains. It's the short-term tax wrecking ball. When you hold an investment for more than a year and sell, your profit is a long-term capital gain, taxed at 0, 15, or 20% depending on income. But when you buy and sell inside a year, which is every single trade Tyler makes, the profit is a short-term gain and it's taxed as ordinary income, the same rate as your paycheck. For Tyler, earning $75,000 a year, that's 22% at the federal level, before his state takes a cent. Every winning trade hands roughly a fifth of the gain straight to the IRS that year before it can ever compound. Then there's the part the screenshots never show. The statistical reality. This isn't opinion. It's some of the most thorough data in all of finance. A landmark study tracking everyday trader in an entire country's market over more than a decade found that fewer than 1% of them earned reliable profits after costs. A separate study found more than 8 out of 10 day traders lose money. Research in Brazil found that 97% of people who day traded for more than 300 days lost money. And the famous study of US investors found the most active traders underperformed the market by about 6.5 percentage points a year. Not once. Every year. Now, I'm going to be generous to Tyler. For the rest of this video, we're going to assume Tyler is better than 80% of day traders, that he's actually one of the ones who makes money. We are giving him the optimistic outcome. Keep that in mind because even the generous version of this story doesn't end the way Tyler thinks. There's also the friction, and this is the leak Tyler never actually feels. Every trade carries a cost. The spread between the buy price and the sell price, the occasional fee, the slippage when the price moves a hair before his order fills. On any single trade, it's nothing. A few cents. Not worth noticing. But a day trader doesn't make one trade. Tyler churns his whole account over and over, easily 20 times its value in a single year. Even at 0.1% per round trip, turning the account over 20 times means roughly 2% of his money quietly evaporates into friction every year, before he has made a single dollar of profit. That isn't a separate disaster from the underperformance we just talked about. It's one of the reasons that underperformance exists. The market doesn't have to beat Tyler, his own trading does the job for free. And finally, there's the trap underneath all of it: overconfidence. The data shows traders systematically sell their winners too early and hold their losers too long, convinced the next trade is the one that proves they've got it figured out. A few good trades feel like skill. They're usually luck wearing a costume, and the costume is expensive. Now, Greg looks at all of that and feels safe. He's not a day trader, he's not making hundreds of frantic trades. He holds for days or weeks. Surely the calmer version is the smart version. It's calmer. It isn't winning. Greg trades far less than Tyler, so two things genuinely improve. His friction costs are lower because he's making a fraction of the trades. And he's not chained to a screen all day. Those are real advantages over Tyler, and they matter. But the two biggest problems don't go away. They just shrink. Greg is still holding almost everything for less than a year, which means almost every gain he takes is still a short-term gain, still taxed as ordinary income at that same 22% every year it happens. And he's still trying to time the market, deciding when to get in, when to get out, which trend is real, and which is a trap. The data on that is just as unforgiving for swing traders as for day traders. Most people who try to time the market underperform the person who simply stayed in it. So Greg occupies the middle, he bleeds less than Tyler, he still bleeds. He's the cautionary tale that looks responsible. If I stopped here, I'd be doing exactly what the trading gurus do in reverse, telling you half the story. So let me be honest about when trading actually makes sense, because there are real cases. A tiny number of people genuinely have skill. That landmark study found a small fraction of traders who really did earn consistent profits year after year in a way that wasn't luck. They exist. The problem is they're under 1%, and almost everyone who starts trading is certain they're in that group. Confidence isn't evidence. If you're going to trade anyway, doing it inside a Roth IRA changes the tax math completely. Inside a Roth, those short-term gains aren't taxed at all. The single biggest leak in Tyler's strategy, the annual tax on every win, simply disappears. If you must trade, that's where it belongs, not in a taxable account. And there's a real psychological pull here that I'm not going to pretend away. Doing something feels better than doing nothing. For some people, the sense of control is worth a lot. That's a real human need. The mistake is funding it with money that's supposed to build your future. Notice the pattern. Every one of these is conditional, or it applies to a rare exception, or it's about feelings rather than returns. None of them flips the math for an ordinary person trying to build wealth. So why does Ryan, the one doing almost nothing, keep pulling ahead? He wins on taxes. Ryan almost never sells, so he almost never triggers a taxable gain. His money compounds untouched for 30 years, while Tyler and Greg hand over a cut every April. Deferred tax isn't a small thing. It's decades of extra compounding on money that would otherwise have gone to the government. He wins on cost. One index fund, charging next to nothing, owning hundreds of the largest companies in America automatically. No spreads, no slippage, no hundreds of trades leaking value. He wins on the historical record. According to S&P's own long-running data, roughly 9 out of 10 professional fund managers, people who do this full-time with teams and tools Tyler will never have, fail to beat a simple index over 15 years. If the professionals can't, the math on Tyler is not encouraging, and he wins on control. Ryan decides if and when he ever realizes a gain. Tyler's and Greg's gains arrive whether they want them that year or not. That control turns into real money, especially in retirement. It's boring, it's effective, and it's about to win by a margin nobody at that barbecue would have believed. For the first few years, the three of them look close enough that nobody can tell. The gap opens quietly, and it opens in a direction Tyler never checks. By year 5, Tyler's account is around $63,000. Greg's is about $68,000. Ryan's is about $75,000. Close. Tyler's still got the best stories, so it still feels like a tie at worst. By year 10, the lines have separated. Tyler's at roughly $134,000. Greg's at $154,000. Ryan's at $192,000. Tyler is now almost $60,000 behind the guy who never opened the app, and he has no idea because he's comparing himself to last month, not to Ryan. By year 15, it's not close anymore. Tyler, $213,000. Greg, $264,000. Ryan, $373,000. By year 20, Ryan has $656,000. Tyler has $302,000. Ryan now has more than double what the hardest worker of the three managed to build. By year 25, the gap turns almost cruel. Ryan is sitting on about $1,095,000. Tyler has just crossed $400,000. The man who never opened the app now has nearly $700,000 more than the man who watched the market every single day. And there are still 5 years left to run, with compounding about to do the most violent work of its entire life in the home stretch. Think of the 3 lines on a chart for a second. Tyler spikes and crashes and spikes again, frantic, going almost nowhere. Greg's chops along with smaller swings, climbing a little. Ryan's just rises, boring, relentless, straight. The frantic line and the flat line are heading to 2 completely different retirements. 30 years in. All 3 are 60 years old. All 3 put in exactly the same money. $360,000, $1,000 a month for 360 months. Here's where they land. Tyler, the day trader who treated the market like a full-time job, about $511,000. Greg, the swing trader who played it calmer, about $812,000. Ryan, who bought one index fund and closed the app, about $1,778,000. Ryan ends with more than 3 times what Tyler built. He's more than $960,000 ahead of him. And remember, this is the generous version of Tyler, the better than most one who actually made money. The typical day trader doesn't land at $500,000. The typical day trader lands underwater. Tyler didn't lose because he was dumb. He lost because three forces ran against him every single day for 30 years. The tax on every win, the friction of every trade, and the simple fact that almost nobody beats the market by trying. None of it felt like losing in any given week. By the end, it added up to over $1 million he'll never get back. Now, your numbers won't be Tyler's or Greg's or Ryan's. Your income is different. Your tax bracket is different. Your timeline is different. So if you want to run your own to see exactly what trading versus holding would cost you over your real working years, that's what the Wealth Logician's Vault is for. Members get the full set of calculators I build for these breakdowns, so you can drop your own figures in and watch the gap appear for yourself. The link's in the description. But before you go run your numbers, there's one last cost in Tyler's story that we still haven't added up, and it's the one he can never earn back. We've measured all of this in dollars. Now line it up in the one currency Tyler can never get more of: his time. Tyler watched the market most of the day, most trading days, plus prep in the morning and review at night. Call it 2,000 hours a year. Over 30 years, that's 60,000 hours. 60,000 hours is the equivalent of working a second full-time job, a second entire career, for 3 decades. Greg, the swing trader, spent far less, but it wasn't free. A few hundred hours a year, watching charts and managing positions. Over 30 years, somewhere around 10,000 hours. 2.5 full work years spent. Ryan spent about 4 hours a year, a few minutes each month to make his purchase, and an occasional glance. Over the entire 30 years, roughly 120 hours, about 3 working weeks total. So line it up. The man who worked a second career finished last. The man who spent 3 weeks finished first, with over $1 million more. Tyler didn't just lose money chasing the market, he paid for the privilege of losing. 60,000 hours of his one life handed over for a result worse than doing almost nothing. That's the real bill, and no return in any year ever pays it back. So what actually works? It isn't picking a side in the trading versus investing fight. The real answer is the one nobody's selling, because there's no course to sell with it. Step 1. Build your core wealth in low-cost index funds during your working years. This is where the math wins. Flatly. Lower taxes, lower costs, broader diversification, and a historical record the professionals can't beat. It's the boring engine, and it's the one that ends up at $1.75 million. Most of your money, maybe all of it, belongs here. Step 2. If the urge to trade is real, and for some of you it genuinely is, don't pretend it away. Wall it off. Take a small slice you can afford to lose completely, no more than 5% of your portfolio, and let that be your casino. Trade it. Scratch the itch. Learn what you want to learn. Just keep it small, and ideally keep it inside a Roth so the taxes don't compound the damage. The other 95% stays boring. The point isn't to never have fun. The point is to never let the fun touch your future. Step 3. Be honest about the scoreboard. Measure your trading against what the index did over the same period, not against your best week, and count your time as a real cost because it is. If you're putting in hundreds of hours to underperform a fund you could buy in 10 seconds, that's not a hobby. That's an expensive job you're paying to do. The trap was never trading itself. The trap is mistaking activity for progress. Tyler felt like he was winning every single week, and the feeling cost him a fortune and a second lifetime of hours. The market doesn't pay you for effort. For most people, most of the time it pays you for patience. Now, all 3 of these men spread their money across the whole market, or tried to. But what if one of them had skipped the trading and the index entirely and just bought a single great company 30 years ago and never sold? Imagine buying one stock back in 1995 and simply forgetting about it. The number that comes back might be the most surprising math of all. That's a different story. And we'll run it next.